Hi, class. As I'm noted in my bio, I've had quite a bit of experience actually in sales, although I've never taught a class. It seems honestly sort of a awkward subject for me to get my hands around as far as instructing on it, because I may have read some books on sales years and years ago. Uh, I read Trump's when I was younger, The Art of the Deal and all that. So I did kind of focus on it, but I find it easier in this moment to talk about certain uh, deals that sort of define me, and tell those stories anecdotally, some today, but more over time, as I can equate them or relate them to the various topics in the text as we go forward and the modules. So let me just tell you some things, and this is just the beginning, but I think it's good for now. So I've learned a couple things over the years, uh, and I'm like a lot of people who say, "Oh golly, I really don't like sales all that much," and there's part of sales that I don't like. Uh, you know, I hate cold calling, and I hate going to affairs to press the flesh and network and all that stuff. I kind of like to do it on my own terms. Uh, that's the way I've always been, and I've been successful at it again. But I'm not, and I'm good at, I think, coaching people, but I don't always follow the format very well. I like it to kind of happen more organically. And I think that's, again, I feel awkward sometimes socially, even though I'm okay with it, and that's why I don't feel uh, very good at sales. I mean, not very good at it. It's why I feel uncomfortable sometimes. But I have to look back and I say I'm I've always been really good at it, and I know some of the reasons why. I don't necessarily know all of them, but I know some of the things that have aided me. And I've read the first four chapters in the text, and I I could equate them again as we go through. But I'd rather lay some of these out in the beginning, and then when I get to the appropriate slides later on, I'll remind you. So um, I kind of first knew that I had, and I didn't think about it at the time. My first kind of foray with sales came in when I was in a junior in college at Washington State, and I had a fraternity brother who was a communications major that was appointed to the business manager to the Evergreen there, which was the school paper, and he hired like four or five salespeople that were also advertising and communications uh, people. A couple of them were also fraternity brothers, and uh, I was the only one that didn't know anything about it. I had, like I told you, I was getting my degree in zoology, ended up with wildlife biology, and then environmental science. So, I just kind of looking for jobs. I was a teaching assistant too. Well, not that year, the next year. But anyway, it sounded like a good idea, so I said I'd give it a try. And what he did is he gave everybody a list of customers. And then we just went out and tried to sell advertisements in the paper, and we got paid a commission. I can't remember, it was 10 or 15%, I think. And in the beginning, I'd go down. You want to run, and I think this is what everybody else did. You want to run an ad? Yes or no? Okay. You know, what do you want? If it's a yes, okay, I'll talk to you later. If it was a no, and so I did okay in the beginning. I was like everybody else, making $300-400. But I started to try some things, uh, maybe out of boredom. I can't remember. But I started taking people ideas, and I'll talk about a lesson I learned in that in a minute that had extreme relevance years later when I got into sales in Hawaii. So I would take ideas of ads in, because I'd go in expecting them to have an idea, and more often than not, they didn't. And that made it easier for them to say no. So I started doing sketches or layouts of ads kind of conceptually. Sometimes I'd get uh, some figure art from the guy who did the mock-ups in the back, a picture, a cartoon picture of somebody or something, and I would just lay them out. And I immediately saw a return on that of about 70, 75% of the time I'd get a positive response, up from, probably a 20% response. And it just made a huge difference when you took something in there for somebody to look at. Because they had two responses. No, I'm not interested. They'd look at it, or yeah, okay. And then they would do one of two things. They'd say, yeah, run it. Yeah, go ahead. Finish that up and run it. Or they would say, yeah, how about if we did this, or how about if we did that? Did you think about this, or did you think about that? And I learned in the beginning, if they didn't like exactly what I was suggesting, my feelings would get a little bit hurt or bruised. But I got over that pretty quickly after I started getting paychecks for about $1,100-1,200 a month. Well, gross. So, in those days, that was a great part-time job, and I was doing 3 times better than everybody else. And again, that taught me a lesson that I'll revisit here in a second. So when I got to Hawaii, I got into a different level of sales, and I became a planner. I took my planning experience that I had with the federal government, with the Bureau of Land Management, and turned it into a consulting business that culminated in 1990. I mean, I had a lot of good years, but that was the best year. In 1990, I personally sold $88 million worth of real estate, the majority of which were 4 different transactions. And I made about $1.3 million on the last one. I made $750,000 commission. And it was all about these principles that you're taught actually in the book. And they all related to these things that I wrote down. So because what I did is I looked for properties that had entitlements. As a planner, I knew the process that they would have to go through to develop a piece of property. In Hawaii, it was normally a 2-year process. And so I started out with small developers. I would tell them I could take it from start to finish, and I would walk them through the entitlement process. If it were zoned, I'd get it subdivided. I'd make sure it had water commitments. Those are the entitlements. And I would do these things that were usually spread amongst other consultants, and they would have to do the footwork to find these consultants, but I would act as literally as their agent for that process, walk them all the way through it. Usually get a commission up front on the purchase, and then I had gotten a real estate license and eventually got a broker's license, so I would handle the sales on the other end too. I really was a one-stop shop and got to be pretty well known for it, actually. So I would look for properties that I could say in all honesty, I would do this. That's number 4 on my list, I think. That I would say I would do this. In a couple instances, I had customers say, well, would you be a partner? And that's one of the first really kind of big ones that I did. I went to a Japanese company in Honolulu and I presented this. And one of the things that I had learned how to do when I was getting my MBA in the mid 80s was to do a spreadsheet. So I would do spreadsheets on these analysis, and I would estimate over 18 or 24-month periods from, purchase to final sales of how long it would take them to put in the infrastructure and sell them. And again, that's what I kind of became known for on the Big Island and in the state. I mean, people that wanted to do stuff on the Big Island would call me. And one of the first ones that I dealt with was a Japanese company, and I took the spreadsheet in and they looked at it. This goes down to the second to the last one. Don't worry about having all the answers, just the most important ones. And the accountant looked at the spreadsheet and said, well, you've got 7% interest rate, and the going rate right now is 7.5. And I was kind of speechless, kind of a little bit embarrassed. That was the last time I was embarrassed about something like that, because I learned a lesson that I'll share with you in a second. And excuse me. So I said, okay, well, I'll recalculate it. And I knew just off the top of my head that, that I had estimated $1 million profit, so that through an 18 or 24-month period, so that 0.5% was probably costing, $15,000 or something like that. So it was more a point of pride than anything else. So I said, as I recalculated it, after that, I made sure that I set the spreadsheet up so I could what if in the moment. So if somebody would say that now, I would just enter the new interest rate in the appropriate reference cell, and then it would have answered that in about 10 seconds or less. But anyway, that said, it occurred to me later, what I learned is that person was just doing their job, the accountant. And nobody had any problems with what I was proposing. But just like that cadre of advertising person that I was telling you about, that of the ones that said yes, half of them just gave their blessing in the moment. The other half had to tweak it, had to put their brand on it or their chicken scratch on it, which is exactly what the accountant was doing. Just demonstrating his expertise as a stakeholder in doing his job. And that was the last time I ever let that bother me. I mean, from then on, I went in to presentations welcoming that kind of input, because you want to involve them, all that have a say in it, in the process, get their buy-in, get their participation, because that goes a long, long way to selling it. So in that moment, I knew I could almost do the math in my head and say, well, it isn't, what I didn't say is, well, it doesn't make any difference, does it? Because it didn't. Again, so I kept my mouth shut, and the next time I said, yeah, good, thank you, you're right. I'll fix that. And you do. You handle all the questions, but you do your homework well enough that you have the majority of the most significant facts out there to be analyzed. I'll go back to be passionate about it. Don't treat this deal like it's going to be the last one you ever do with this customer. Be honest, be upfront. Don't recommend anything that you wouldn't do yourself, because if you treat them well, if you treat them crappy and like this is going to be the last deal because you're going to make so much money, then more likely than not it probably will be. What you want to do is obviously set your sights to make them money, to make them successful, and they'll do business with you again. And really that's what you're looking for. You're looking for loyalty and commitment over time. The passionate thing is really important, particularly for the product I was dealing with, because when I found something, I got excited about it, and as much as I hated, like I said, I hated sales, I never thought about it when I was talking about it. I mean, I knew I could sell ice to an Eskimo if I'd found glacier ice that was really special. And you have to kind of look for that item that you're comfortable with, like that you know, and that you can explain the benefits and the value to the customer and believe them. This last item was kind of random, let them talk about the competition. I first learned this when I was a PhD student in Eugene, and I was working on the side doing some consulting at that time for a small ISP, internet service provider. It was before the internet really took off. And I went with one of the owners over to a bank, and we were trying to sell them a system. And so it was like a $70,000 sale for a system, not just getting them to sign up for a customer. And the guy, who was pretty inexperienced, actually, I mean, nobody was an experienced internet service provider, said, "Who are your competitors?" And the woman, who he was quasi friends with, I mean, they knew one another, was kind to him as a consequence and said, you should never ask, what do I not like about a competitor? Who are my competitors and what don't you like about them? She said, what you should do is you should say, who are your competitors? You should compliment them if it's genuine to do so. And you should ask, what do you like about them? And I thought about that, and she explained it further, and she said, it's like when you ask a woman who's married to a jerk, what do you like about the guy? And they'll say something to the effect, and this can go both ways for husband and wives, but this is the story she told. She said, you ask a woman what she likes about a husband. If it's a bad husband, and it's usually, there is the intonation, what do you like about him? Well, he's a nice guy, he's good. He's a good dad to the kids. He takes them fishing, and he goes to their baseball games. And they'll lay out half a dozen things, good things, and then they'll start to tell you the bad. And he probably drinks too much, and this and that. But it's all a matter of how you come at it. So don't ask what's wrong or what you don't like about them. Let them ask them what they like about them instead, and let them, if they are going to tell you the secrets about what they don't like. Because most people, if you ask them outright, what don't you like about them, they take it as an infringement, that they're breaking a code with the other person, and they are, actually. They're talking about things they shouldn't be talking about to you necessarily. And so that's something to keep in mind. Now, I'm going to go through the other slides. I'll treat this as lecture A for cell 5, and the next one is B. I'll do it tomorrow. It's getting a little late here and I'm tired. But like I'm going to type next to this, there's I like to put my seminar assessments at the end of a slideshow. And I'm going to put it at the end of this one rather than the next one, in case you're not inclined to watch it in full. But 2 parts. I just want you to make a comparison of the differences and similarities after you've gone through the material of marketing and sales. They're not the same thing. Sales is nested, I can tell you, in marketing. And this is something that drives me crazy on kind of a personal level, that people use the terms interchangeably. Oh, I'm going to do your marketing for you. No, you're not. You're going to do advertising and sales. That's what you're going to do. Marketing is broader than that. There's other things about, this product or service that you're not going to be involved with at all. You're going to do the marketing and sales. But people don't like to call themselves salespeople, but marketing sounds kind of sexy. So you hear people make that mistake all the time. What they're usually talking about, they're usually talking about the promotions, and nested in that is advertising and sales. The second thing you'll do is look at the next slide, which is an ethics issue, situation, or case study, mini case study from chapter 3 slides that I've stuck in here, and I think it's good. So just answer the questions, don't go overboard. But there's a lesson in there that I think is consistent to some extent with a couple of things that I talked about, and as well as some of the things that are in the text and yet to be presented in slideshow presentation B of Cell 5 module number 1. So thank you, and I hope that was interesting. And here is slide number 4. This is your case study. You can put it on stop and take a gander at the questions.